What's up, guys? Austin Baeza here with Full Spectrum Living, and here with the first video that I've been able to make that actually is working completely with the camera and everything. I actually made a 25-minute video the other day, and it didn't work. It came out the wrong format and things like that. Today, we are doing our first session of this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now, if you've read this book, then you know how amazing it is. Now, I've read this book audio-wise, right? And when I read an audiobook, I have always skipped to the first chapter. You know, there's this first part called About the Author, and then there's your table of contents, and then how to get the most out of this book. And I'm like, alright, I get it. You know, maybe somebody doesn't know how to read and they need to understand how to read the book or something. I don't need that. I just want to read the book. I never really recognized how important it was to read those pages as well. So today I started from the beginning. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't read about the author. Next book I definitely will, and I probably will go back and read this one. But when I read the part about how to get the most out of this book, I was actually very determined to get the most out of this book possible. So what I did was I read through that area, and it told me a mindset that I should put myself at to read this book. And when I did that, it really helped me realize, alright, this is what I'm going to expect out of this book. Going into reading this book with that mindset made all of the difference. So, what is this book about? Part 1 says fundamental techniques in handling people. If you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. So, reading the beginning of this, it talks about a couple different criminals that did horrible things in the world. But when it came to the point where they went to jail, they actually didn't take the blame for it, or they didn't criticize themselves for it. They didn't condemn themselves for it. They didn't judge themselves for it. One of the situations was about a cop killer who, on his deathbed, blood flowing from his wounds, he wrote on a piece of paper, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm." Even though he killed a cop, literally, you know. So in his mind, he didn't condemn himself. He actually regarded himself as a public benefactor. And the same thing happened with Al Capone, America's most notorious public enemy. When he went to go to jail, Capone didn't condemn himself either. He actually regarded himself as a public benefactor as well, an unappreciated and misunderstood public benefactor. So if Al Capone and the two-gun Crowley, which is the other guy's name, Dutch Schultz, and the desperate men and women behind prison walls don't blame themselves for anything, what about the people with whom you and I come in contact with? Right? So I guess in this moment he is starting to make the idea of, if the worst of the worst people that we can come up with that went to jail or things like that don't condemn themselves for what they've done, why would we condemn people in our day-to-day life? And if we did, what difference would it make? That's his first outlook, you know, and that's kind of the outlook standing from, like, all right, let's say that you're right, you know, let's say that there's a reason to condemn the person, which there never is, an actual reason why you condemning that person is necessary. And we'll find that out later on in the book, which is a huge gate open in my mind, because I've always been the person that's like, hey, let me give you some criticism, you know, you're not doing this very well, and you could do this better. I might not say that to somebody. I might think that in my mind, though. This person could be better at this. This person could be better at that. this person doesn't do this right and they should do this better. And that's never felt good to me doing that. And you also recognize why later on in the book. I recognize why later on in the book. But anyways, moving on, some key notes that I had just went ahead and put some highlights over that I was just going to read through was John Wanamaker, founder of the stories that bear his name, once confessed, "I learned 30 years ago that it is foolish to scold. I have enough trouble overcoming my own limitations without fretting over the fact that God has not seen fit to distribute evenly the gift of intelligence." It says, Wanamaker learned this lesson early, but I personally had to blunder through the old world for a third of a century before it even began to dawn upon me that 99 times out of 100 people don't recognize themselves for anything, don't criticize themselves for anything, no matter how wrong it may be. So if people don't criticize themselves no matter how wrong it might be, then why would we criticize them? What difference is that going to make? So if you don't criticize yourself for something, then why would me criticizing you do anything, right? If you're not doing it to yourself and you are the most important thing that you have to take care of, why me coming to you saying, hey, you're really bad at cleaning? All that's going to make you do is go, I'm doing the best I can. Why would that be any different? And then you're going to come back at me with, this and that, reasons why, your cleaning skills are okay and that this is, the situation. And then probably condemnation will come towards me. So criticism is futile because it puts a person on the defensive and usually makes him strive to justify himself. Criticism is dangerous because it wounds a person's precious pride, hurts his sense of importance, and arouses resentment. All of those things are negative. Every single one of those things is negative. Why is there any reason to throw a group of negativity towards somebody just to get nothing back? There's no liable reason why criticism and condemnation is healthy. Now there's studies that show this all over the place. Animals rewarded for good behavior will learn much more rapidly and retain what is learned far more effectively than an animal punished for bad behavior. And the same thing applies to humans. Studies have proven this. By criticizing, we do not make lasting changes and often incur resentment. Resentment meaning doing the opposite of the thing. As we thirst for approval, we dread condemnation. The resentment that criticism engenders can demoralize employees, family members, and friends, and still not correct the situation that has been condemned. So there was a safety coordinator of an engineer company, and one of his responsibilities was to make sure that everybody wore their helmets at the job. So he would use all of his power to go in there, put your helmets on, keep your helmets on. People would put their helmets on. When he left, they would just take their helmets off, right? And he noticed this over a time. He's like, all right, this is not working. Obviously, these people aren't going to wear their helmets with me just telling them to wear their helmets, right? So what do I need to do? I need to find a different way to make them wear their helmets. So he came across it a different way. He came in the next morning and he said, do the helmets not fit you guys right, or are they uncomfortable? People, no, they're not uncomfortable. He's like, well, I just wanted to remind you that they were created to protect you from this and this that you go through on a daily basis. And just a suggestion would be to continue to wear them so that you don't go against the law of wearing them, and this will protect you. So if you have any issues with wearing it because of its uncomfortableness or something, just let me know. And the amount of people that wore the helmets rose dramatically. So the condemnation did nothing except resented them to want to wear them even more. The understanding and appreciation of the people having their own power and wanting their own decisions, and being considerate, and giving suggestion, caring, came across to make a much more substantial change. You'll find examples of futility of criticism bristling on thousands of pages of history. Theodore Roosevelt blaming Taft, for the presidency not going right. After Taft, was done, he was crying and he said, "I couldn't have saw this going any other way," because Theodore attacking Taft for the presidency not going the way it was supposed to, all that did was break down Taft more into the realization of the same situation he was already in. That condemnation did nothing but broke that human down. The pride broke and didn't change what was supposed to happen in any way. Right? And there you are. Human nature in action. Wrongdoers blaming everybody but themselves. We are all like that. So when you and I are tempted to criticize someone tomorrow, let's remember Al Capone and these other guys. Let's realize that criticism are like homing pigeons. They always return home. Let's realize that the person we are going to correct and condemn will probably justify himself or herself and condemn us in return. Or like the General Taft will say, "I don't see how I could have done any differently from what I have." So like a pigeon goes somewhere and then comes home. So does condemnation. Condemnation is somebody at a base. You condemn them. They go through a whole bunch of, pretty much terrorism in their minds and their emotions, and then it brings you back home just to realize that it doesn't make any change. So if your real goal is to make a change in somebody's life, which that should be our goals, to care and love one another, which there's some great stuff that we'll get into later on, that talks about why that's the best way to go. Our goal should never be to criticize or condemn anybody, which leads back to what we came through at the first chapter. If you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. Right, so moving forward, then it goes into Lincoln. And I was so indulged into this conversation about Lincoln that I didn't even highlight very much on this page like I did all over the other pages. Because I didn't realize that Lincoln was such a... I'm not exactly sure what the word is, but I never did as much research in Lincoln as I wanted to. All I knew was he got shot, which is kind of ridiculous. I'm not going to criticize myself for it because there's no reason for that. What I am going to say is I'm excited to learn more about Lincoln because his story found to be more interesting than I had expected. But anyways, so Lincoln used to deal with people and criticize people through letters. And then one time he attacked one of his opponents openly with letters published to a newspaper without telling it, anonymously. But he did it just once too often. In vain, the politician named James Shield found out that it was Lincoln, got on a horse and went after to Lincoln and asked him to duel him. And Lincoln, not being a fighter, didn't want to duel him, but didn't want to lose his pride and his position of power at the time. So he agreed to the duel. With long arms, he decided to do some kind of sword that would benefit him. Went through the studies of how to, the training and everything necessary. But last minute, it was interrupted and the duel was stopped. And now, Lincoln's life changed. It was a very invaluable lesson in the art of dealing with people. Never again did he write an insulting letter. Never again did he ridicule anyone. And from that time on, he almost never criticized anyone for anything, right? That's where the favorite quote of his came from: "Judge not, that ye not be judged." And I put next to that, "or condemn not, that ye not be condemned," right? And it went as far as when even his wife had spoke harshly about Southern people, Lincoln simply said, "Don't criticize them. They are just doing what we would do under similar circumstances." So a sense of empathy came once the sense of criticizing went away, right? A positive outlook, to say the least, instead of a negative outlook, and the action of positive action instead of a negative action as well. So then the Gettysburg was fought during a 3-day. So the Gettysburg was a huge situation, a huge battle that was going on that they couldn't get defeated. And finally, I guess they were going against Lee, and it finally came to this position where they had Lee in their hands. They could have taken over Lee and his army. They got stuck somewhere or something. So Lincoln calls his superintendent, or whoever runs the army, the army runner. I'm not very literate with all of that wording, and tells him, "Go, take him out, take him out." He sends a telegram. He says, "Don't get everybody together and talk about it. Just go do it." And the guy freaked out. And he's like, all right, he got everybody together. He talked about it. He made every excuse why they couldn't go. And then Lee was able to get out and go away. And Lincoln was astronomically obliterated. He was so astounded that he didn't take him out. It was the golden moment that they could have ended the war, and the guy didn't do it. And Lincoln was so upset. He wrote this letter. Just imagine getting this letter from somebody. It says, "My dear General," it was a general, "I do not believe you appreciate the magnitude of the misfortune involved in Lee's escape. He was within our easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would, in connection with our other late successes, have ended the war. As it is, the war will be prolonged indefinitely. If you could not safely attack Lee last Monday, how can you possibly do so on the south of the river, when you can take with you very few, no more than 2/3 of the forces you then had in hand? It would be unreasonable to expect, and I do not expect, that you can now effect much. Your golden opportunity is gone, and I am distressed immeasurably because of it." What do you suppose Meade did when he read this letter, the general? Well, Meade never got it. The general never got the letter because Lincoln never mailed the letter. It was found among his papers after his death. That was where I have left off rereading this chapter, which I actually listened to these pages through audio, and I don't remember any of it because when I went back and I read it again, it made all the difference. I am a huge advocate of reading books and not listening to audiobooks unless you have to. And so my pretty much my goal is the matter of figuring out what there is that we can do that will benefit us, that will benefit us all. And what I think is I don't even know what I just said. I kind of blinked out for a second. I'm sorry. I was looking out the window at somebody walking by and just people watching for a second. Anyways, so that was a great area. So I still have some more to read before finishing the first chapter again. But at the end of the first chapter, it says, instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. intriguing, that's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism. So instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out what they do, figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism. And it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. Sympathy, like you saw with Lincoln and his wife, saying, hey, let's not talk about them that way. They're just doing what we would have done. Tolerance. The biggest war going on, and the general's one job is to win the war. He had a chance, and he didn't take it. And what did Lincoln do? He had tolerance, and he didn't send the letter. He was found by his deathbed. And then kindness. Kindness, such as another lesson that we'll read on the next chapter, where it reads about somebody who was horrible at their job, and the lady who ran the place, instead of criticizing him like everybody else did, found throughout the day one thing that he did right and told him that he did that right. And when she started doing that, eventually he became amazing at his job, to the point where even the people that criticized him started thanking him for how good he was doing and appreciating how good he was. So God himself, sir, does not propose to judge a man until the end of his days. So I thought that was interesting too. To know all is to forgive all. And Dr. Johnson said, God himself, sir, does not propose to judge man until the end of his days. Why should you and I? That's a good one. God's not looking to judge us right now. He's going to judge us at the end of our days, at the end of the days, whatever it is. So, principle number 1, don't criticize, don't condemn, or complain.